Okay, so for the deepening literacy understanding discussion, I decided to make a TikTok to demonstrate my learning because I'm pretty familiar with it. So I thought this is a creative and fun way that I could show you guys what I've learned. So from the November 18th Transforming Literacy Task to Deepen Learning article, I think the first thing that really stuck out to me was students should be able to think critically and problem solve when learning literacy skills. I think in the article it talked about like a lot of times people think of literacy skills as basic reading or writing, and it's not that. It's actually problem solving, like thinking critically, more of that deeper level of learning. And then another thing that stuck out to me was provide problems with many different pathways to successful completion. So that's something I want to do when I am a teacher. I want to provide, like, say I'm making an assessment, I want there to be many different ways to complete this assessment so that students could be successful, and then they could kind of decide how they want to do their own learning, which I think is really important because then they can be more engaged and they get more excited to learn. And the next point I kind of made was different ways to approach the task, kind of what I just talked about. So say some students like writing and some like talking. So the kids who like talking can film a video of them talking or make a podcast, and the kids who like to write can write a paper or write a presentation or whatever. And then the last thing I talked about was task-centered questions instead of having students tell information. I think that was a really good point they talked about in the article. I feel like a lot of the times as teachers we'll just be like, oh, can you guys tell me what you just read about? And that's kind of boring. And so that was one thing. Those are the things that I think stuck out to me that will help students' learning and literacy if we can really incorporate those into our curriculums as future teachers. From the hip hop literacy, I wasn't for sure on like what, there wasn't really an article link, but from the slides I really liked how it talked about modeling, and then I just liked learning about all the different approaches they used. Like I liked the book where it talked about the boy who created a rap or the dancing. I think those are really cool. And I also liked how they, like, for the rap, they brought microphones in, and that was a way to get students engaged and excited because they like got to have hands-on experience, and I think that is really important. So I think like when I'm a future teacher, I really want to focus on giving my students options to be able to be creative and maybe make a rap for a project, and then you could bring in the microphones and the fun things like that to help deepen their learning. And you could easily like incorporate that with literacy, like a rap. Like say you read a book and you want your students to create a rap based on what they learned in the book, or even you could do it on a unit. So I think that's how you could connect that to literacy. And then the next one was the children's surprisingly early metaphoric capacities. I wasn't really too familiar with this concept, so I kind of learned a lot. I learned that the new metaphors, is what they called it in the article, lead to new insight. I also realized that metaphoric thinking comes naturally to young children because children are impulsive and like when it comes to play and exploring. So like in the article it talked about like the impulsiveness comes from like they don't say a child's playing, they're not thinking, oh, is this going to be a safe decision or is this going to be not safe, and that's kind of where impulse comes in. Another thing I talked about was children learn the meaning of word and extend. When children learn the new meaning of a word, they typically tend to extend the word to an object. So I think that's an easy way you could incorporate student learning and literacy with this article. Like say you were trying to teach a concept, you could bring an object and correlate the object to what you're trying to teach, and that would be an easy way to help deepen literacy understanding for children in a metaphorical way. Yeah. Another thing that really stuck out to me was recognizing similarities to create metaphors. So I think that creating those similarities in your curriculum and your lessons as a teacher will be really important to help deepen student learning and literacy. And then also, I think another thing the article talked about was encourage metaphoric renaming of games. So I think, again, you can use that in the classroom. Come up with games where the students are retelling and renaming things for you and asking questions. Like, say you're introducing a literacy lesson and you start off being like, what does this remind you of? And that start right away helps create those connections and gets the children's brains thinking. And then the last thing was a TED Talk, which talked about children's understanding of their own brain. And I really liked listening, hearing all the different kids talk and listening to their own understandings about themselves. One thing that stuck out to me was when she talked about thinking we need to assess our own strategies. So I think we can connect that to literacy really in any way. We're trying to understand our children's learning. We need to think about how they are thinking and put ourselves in their position. And then also another thing that really stuck out to me in this was she talked about how children are less literal when it comes to concepts, so their ideas flow more. And so I think if we were teaching young children literacy, we could really take that to our advantage. And you could do concept maps or things like that to really help children explore ideas around literacy. And so those were some of my key takeaways from the 3 different articles that we were assigned.